I'm gonna be honest, I have not been able to get my head on straight, like, probably for the whole week. So, like, when bad things happen, it makes me feel infinitely worse because I'm like, I already feel like everything in my mind is racing and then the world is collapsing around me, which is like not a helpful or fun feeling to have at all. Instead of being like, let me just find the next thing that I can distract myself with, I kind of was like, let me just do some analysis. So I was doing a lot of like soul searching as to like why I felt so bothered aside from all the external of the world and everything, like why I felt so bothered internally, why my mind was racing a mile a minute. And so while I was just sitting in those feelings of unhappiness for the week, I was like, let me go back to things that talk about unhappy subjects from a more happy perspective. And of course, lining up with, real world events. Movies specifically, because I like a movie. I don't like to watch a whole show. Just give me a movie. I'll watch it, one and done. Movies lining up with, I guess, like hidden themes of hidden, like, ooh, hang on. Themes of suppression and how it's framed from like different perspectives. So like suppression in a society of like a specific group of people, groups of people, whatever, what have you, and how depending on the perspective that you frame those stories, how it changes the narrative and like what we expect from the story. And so there were three movies specifically that I thought went really well together for that theme, topic, and understanding. And that was I Love Boosters, Anniversary, and Wicked. So I've seen like all those movies before, but I think I watched Anniversary. I watched Anniversary most recently. And I was like, you know what movie would go well with this? Wicked. And whenever I watch Wicked, I always say I Love Boosters and Wicked are like such a great double feature. Like you should always watch those movies back to back. If for nothing else, then the style and sound design of both movies, mwah, cannot get better than those two. So that's why I always pair those two together in my head. And then I was like, Anniversary reminded me of Wicked so much because of like the perspective of it all. I feel like Wicked has a dual perspective and Anniversary is like very zoomed in, but the zoomed in perspective that they use is like, it comes from like a place of tone deafness, I guess. So like how even if you have the best of intentions, if you're tone deaf and stuff like that, like you won't get it until it's too late. And that's one of the perspectives that I always picked up on in Wicked as well. So I'm going to get into this because I do have like formal thoughts on like all three movies. I wanted to go through them like individually. Let me see what I actually wrote here. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't remember writing half of these things. I would every day this week, because I didn't watch all these three movies together because I work and I can't watch three movies in one day, unfortunately, which these movies touch on a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. But so every day I was like finishing my work and then I would watch a movie before bed. And honestly, I fell asleep in the middle of a couple of the movies. So I had to wake up in the morning and like watch from a certain point. But I did watch them and I did take notes. So I want to like see what I was saying in the moment because I think it was important, but I don't remember it. Oh my gosh. So I'm in the season of like consuming media a lot more just because I feel like I don't know, I feel like I'm like drowning in all the things that I have access to, but all the things that I like and have meaning to me are not really like showing up for me in the way they were when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, it was so easy to find a show that I liked, like more than easy. And there were so many of them. And now as an adult, I'm looking around and I'm like, adult media is kind of bad. And like, it's either too tone deaf to like be meaningful and be like kind of annoying, which is why I don't really love to watch shows like to fully enjoy the show, I need to watch discourse of it after. And I don't want to watch a show where I have to have like everything broken down into like the bigger societal things at play because the show itself isn't aware of what's happening. I feel like you know that there's more there, but it's not really being presented to you. But these movies present it. So that's why I wanted to go through these. Also, I feel like when I was a kid, shows had a lot more commonalities between them. So if you watched one show about one thing or like one topic or whatever, it was being covered concurrently on like all the different shows in different ways and like different perspectives and stuff like that, which is what I'm playing with these movies. In a way that was like more enriching for me growing up. But shows today are very obsessed with originality to the point that they kind of ignore other media in the ecosystem, in their ecosystem, which I kind of think takes away. But whatever, I'm going to get into the movies now and like how I felt about them. Spoilers if you haven't seen the three movies that I was talking about. I feel like they've all been out long enough, but I will say a big fat recommend for all of them. So if you haven't seen these movies yet, I would say watch them first before watching this because I don't know, this is a weird breakdown. I don't cover like the full stories. I'm just like talking about my feelings about it. Okay, so first getting into I Love Boosters. I didn't watch these movies in this order, but I feel like I Love Boosters is the best place to start because it is like a very good it's a movie that covers everything very succinctly. I feel like it has a good ending, it has a good beginning, and it fleshes out each of the characters very well. And can I just say, I love melodrama when it's done correctly, because sometimes hand holding is necessary. And I feel like you can hand hold without being like preachy or annoying about it in media. This one gets it very right. A lot of shows don't. Like, there are only, I think, like 2 melodramatic shows that I really love because they're constantly telling me like what's going on and stuff like that, how the characters feel about it, what are the greater implications and such. But it's mostly relatable. Like, I feel like the media kind of tap dances on the fourth wall with like what it's like. It's there with you basically. It's holding your hand. It's guiding you through, which I think is a good way to be introduced into topics, especially if you have no prior experience. So I say this movie is the best place to start because of the perspective it's placed in from majority like a workers or like struggling perspective, where there is a goal, but that goal seems so big and so unattainable because of life circumstances, which I feel like majority of the population can relate to at this point in time. But then it also gets into like the base levels of depravity that's needed to uphold the system on both ends. So like from a worker's perspective, so in the movie, Corvette is aimless and she feels empty because there is no real ownership of her work. Like there's no way to access for her, like access the fashion industry, get her designs out there and make money legally, or at least a livable wage legally. So in the movie, we constantly see on the workers' end the trade-off between morality, power, like your own power over yourself, and being able to live like comfortably, sustainably, things like that. And that's all shown very well with the 4 main characters, I think. So we have the practical vision, and I think the vision that most of the viewers would relate to in Sade, like literally just trying to find a way to make money and have connection with people. The only way that's available to you at the moment. It's quick and it's scrappy and it's like, it's not really sustainable, but it feels like it could be if she keeps on growing. Especially shown with like the friends pyramid thing that she was doing, where it's like, if you do this, that, and the third, you get 12K. Like you're using your connections to make money instead of enrich you, because in our current society, connections have to play both roles now. And then we have Jianhu and Violetta, and they're basically just there as like the people who are like repping their causes with their lives, honestly. And they're repping their causes. The thing that I feel is a little bit unrealistic is the ending, but that's why I chose this one to go first, because it has a happy ending. Like the rest of these movies don't have that. Jianhu and Violetta are constantly repping their causes, and they're doing so with their own lives. And it's like a case of the few gathering the many based on like merit. So like if they didn't have the skills, nobody would really gather around the cause because nobody else feels like they're able to contribute as much as those 2 are. And they're imperfect in like their execution, but they're constantly scaling. With help from others, they're able to achieve their goals. And then we have Corvette and Mariah to some extent, like dreamers who are stuck. In Mariah's case, I would say she's a dreamer and she feels connected, but she doesn't really have a lot of direction and purpose for like where to put that energy. That's why she isn't really heard much throughout the movie. But then Corvette would be the opposite, where she's very driven in her goals and everything. She knows what she wants, but she doesn't really want to engage with what her dream could be, because there is something to be said about Corvette. If she had potentially ended up in a situation where she was at the top, would she have gone back and reached down for other people? Like, would she have turned the ladder into stairs rather than pulling it up with her? So I really like the movie because like there is something to be said about like, this could have gone either way depending on the circumstances that were dealt to our characters, and they're all very human in their actions throughout the movie. Did want to talk about one of my favorite scenes from the movie aside from all of that, which is the chase sequence through the factory and also concurrently happening in the streets of Corvette City. And I love it so much because the workers, like the enforcement men that are like working for the management and stuff like that, who are looking for the machine, are like running past these workers. Okay, so the guys, the men in black, I'm just going to call them that. The men in black who are like working for the company management or whatever are running through and past these factory workers, and the factory workers are actively getting in their way. And I love this so much from like my own perspective because I just came out of a managerial role where I was middle management. So the upper management people would be complaining to me and my workers would be complaining to me, and I would just be like in the middle of it all. And I can tell you, like, a job like that literally is not worth your sanity. So those men in black running around trying to find this thing, I felt like them. And I felt like when the workers didn't help them, I felt very like justified on their behalf. Like, of course they wouldn't help them. Like, you're a dog to the people who are actively making their lives worse, actively taking their money, making working conditions harder and doing everything that they can to silence them and make them work harder despite all the things that they're doing to them. Like, it's very hard to sympathize with somebody in that position. That's why I left, because I was like, you're ineffective at meeting anyone's demand when you're in that position. You can't please your bosses. You can't please the people below you. Got to mention this while I was actively recording, but it just came back to me. I have like 2 mini writing pieces, like 2 short stories, kind of exploring like being that's like stripped of their power, but depending on how it's framed to you, like in a manager's role, you're still stripped of your power. Like as an autonomous person, like literally all workers are stripped of humanity to some extent. But I wrote those pieces kind of just exploring how much it's worth it to you, basically. So from my own perspective, it wasn't worth it for me because I was like, I cannot please anyone on either side of the issue. And I'm not doing any favors for myself either. And I appreciated that being like very, very briefly explored, but maybe that was just like my own perspective because of what I had gone through. But the biggest takeaway from that is that nobody will care about you if you don't care about others, which is a bit heavy-handed, but needed, very needed. I've honestly only seen this movie 2.5 times, so there's definitely more that I need to like sink my teeth into. I probably will go and rewatch it and take more notes at a later date. But for right now, I can say every time I've rewatched the movie, it's gotten better. So I don't know. There's something to be said about that. And the same thing is true of Anniversaries. So one thing I like about Anniversary and I Love Boosters together, which is why I like put them like back to back, is because I feel like the writers wrote these characters into very realistic scenarios at first, and then they put them in these positions where it's like, what would your character do if this happened? And it's not a realistic suggestion. It's like, what would your character do if somebody started choking on a baby sandal next to them, right? Like, what would they do in that scenario? And they take it there. They tell you exactly what those characters would do, which I think is very cool. On my first watch through in Anniversary, I did have it a bit spoiled for me. So I saw it on TikTok and I came off of there. I was hot already. I was already mad at the plot, but I was like, you know what? Let me just watch it and see what happens. Luckily, it didn't spoil the movie too much because I still kind of predicted what happened at the end, but the middle part of this movie and the way they tackle the changing world around them is what stuck with me so much. So at the beginning of this movie, we're basically told by the narration, or like in the little clips getting to know everybody, that we're going to be seeing something that is going to conflict with our worldview. And I think it really does that by asserting that science isn't the basis of fact, and you're more likely to get things done through social engineering and like manipulating people's opinions and such, which is very well demonstrated with Liz's character. And Liz's character is one that I find very funny because like in real life, she would be allowed to get away with a lot of the things that she gets away with simply because we're very used to people doing like micro harms on us, like being a bit too close, a bit too forward, a bit too touchy, probing too much, and like thinking that that's normal and stuff like that, and just like something that we have to accept even if it makes us uncomfortable, because it's not something that's big enough to say you need to get away from me about, like without people calling you crazy. So I feel like she's a great representation of how we quickly adapt to things like that and let them chip away at us until eventually there's nothing left. Like they've sculpted us into whatever they wanted us to be. She kind of toes the line of what's acceptable until it's pushed further in the direction of where she wanted it to be. And I feel like that's shown obviously with Josh, like somebody who has given up on himself, and kind of somebody that I feel like stands in a bit for Gen Z sometimes, where it's like he's given up on himself, he's given up on the world becoming better. And because of that, he's quick to like give up on what could be, what he could do, and like what he can contribute to the world. That's good. And he's hoping that if he outsources that, he'll receive like stability and happiness from that. Outsources the responsibility for creating, managing, I don't know, understanding those things. He will in turn receive stability and peace and a stress-free life, or at least a life that he's not as ashamed of because he isn't making a fool of himself, as he said. But anyway, back to Liz, because I did forget to mention that she's basically compared to a parasite also. Like, Josh is the host for her, but because of like the things that she does, the way she takes up space selfishly, tries to control a room, and narrative about stories and such, she's basically just like priming the waters for her sentiments to spread. And I think Birdie like was talking about like some type of bacteria, and while they're talking about the bacteria, they're panning to her as like the bacteria, like the infection in the water that spreads, and once it finds a host, it multiplies, and pretty soon the whole pool is just like unsavable. And that's basically just her beliefs taking over their society. And so what I love so much about the perspective of Anniversary is that we are set in like a liberal family's home, outspoken children, a lot of fun, and a lot of like tight knitness because they're all very accepting of each other's quirks and conditions. But they are naive. And like I said, tone deaf to a fault. Because they're so obsessed with keeping their family together, it ultimately leads to their downfall. Sometimes you gotta cut people out. This movie was definitely a calling card for that. Sometimes you gotta cut people out, even if it's your baby. She should have dropped Josh like a bad habit. She should have said, "Oh, my boy is lost. I can't fix him. He's a man now," and kicked him out of the house because, frankly, he was killing the vibes throughout the whole movie. If the actor did his job well, because I was just like, every time Josh was on screen, I was like, get this man out of here. I would rather see Liz on screen than him, actually, because at least she's like aware and forthcoming about her manipulativeness, or at least that's what we're shown throughout the movie. Josh is just an idiot. Like, I'm sorry, it blows my mind sometimes. I know he is a stand-in for like us, the modern day idiots, but I'm just like, dang, he's annoying. He's necessary, but he's annoying. Anyway, yeah, the perspective of them being like a naive family, so like they're hoping love will win all, and it doesn't. But then also, I think something very, very like key is them ignoring the issue and hoping that it'll go away. Like, that's something that comes up year after year throughout the movie. It's just like, don't worry about it. Don't rock the boat. It'll all be worth it. But because nobody rocked the boat, people ended up fleeing. Because nobody rocked the boat, they ended up having to sign away themselves. I mean, the daughter, Birdie, did rock the boat, but she was a kid. There is also something to be said about children having to endure so much because they have no say in the world that they grow up in. Birdie is a great example of that because, I mean, she's a teen and she's doing what she thinks is right, but she ends up getting her family into more trouble. And she expected them to be down with the cause in a way that they were too weak to really be about. Birdie's tough as nails. Let me just say that. She's tough as nails. But yeah, her parents are a little weak and spineless, and they don't know how to organize much as they say or like profess to be able to, and like espouse their ideas upon the students. I'm mostly talking about the professor. I do forget her name. Hang on. Can I just call her Miss Thing? I don't know her name. One sec. Miss Thing. Ellen. I don't know how I forgot a name like Ellen. She's not in my notes. Like, I really never wrote her name in my notes, which is wild. But anyway, yeah, even though they have all these big ideas and they're like, oh, this is anti-this and anti-that, they're incapable of taking hold of their own reality because they're so trusting in the system and its ability to correct itself. And that ends up being their detriment because they had the money, they had the status, they had the connections long before the movement that we see take place starts to happen. And they knew it was bad from the beginning. I am particularly mad about her husband because he's like, I'm not going to read the book because I don't have to talk to you about the book. Being willingly misinformed or uninformed, just because it's a bit more stressful. Sometimes, like, I understand not having access to the information, but he lived a cushy lifestyle. He had access to everything that he needed access to, and he chose to be uninformed about it because it made his life easier in the short term, the very short term. And that coupled with the engineering, like the social engineering taking place by Liz, it's kind of just like a match made in heaven. Like, they're the perfect people to have fallen for Liz's thing or Liz's like conceptions of like change, because they wouldn't do anything to stop it. And the people that would have done things to stop it were brutally suppressed. Like, mind you, the family was never a threat or never threatened with violence until the end when their backs were against the wall. But because they had so many options and so many avenues available to them to put up walls and ignore what was happening around them, they chose not to do anything. And in the end, they still came for them. Facing like everything, we as a viewer are facing everything that's going on around them and how rapidly their world's changed. But we're doing so from a 5-bedroom, multi-bathroom mansion. A very cushy lifestyle. When I first watched the movie, I didn't even understand how fast the world was changing because me and Liz and her husband were cushioned and insulated inside that very nice house near the lake. So I was like, but like rewatching it, I was like, you guys had the knowledge, like more than enough knowledge to know what was coming. And Diane Lane's character, see, I know Diane Lane, I just don't know the name of the character. Ellen knew what was coming. And her best defense against it was defacing someone else's property rather than organizing or using her network. Like, she has an extensive network. Even though she lost her job because of her actions, she still would have been able to meet with those people, is what I'm thinking. So I'm like, I feel like they didn't really try as much as they could have because they were very concerned with self-preservation and preservation of the family, which is a very important thing to talk about. I feel like I've gone on about this for way too long, but I'm just like, yeah, that's what the whole movie was about. That's what really stuck with me. And I'm like, from this perspective, I can understand why people don't take action until it's too late. They really think that they're protected. And I do think that this is a good watch for everybody who thinks they're protected, just to like show you, you could stop it earlier. Like, you can hold the line, and you would make it better for everybody by doing that. I think I have the most notes about this movie because I think it has so many perspectives. Like, I feel like all the characters are also very well fleshed out. Aside from the core issues, there are things to say about like feminism, bodily autonomy, children's rights, humans' rights, racism. That's the real reason I don't like Josh, because of how he treated Birdie's boyfriend. How they treated Birdie's boyfriend. That is such an important scene, because if one of them had spoken up at that table, Moses wouldn't have left. One, his family probably wouldn't have fled too, and Josh probably would have been a bit less emboldened about what he was trying to do with his wife. But because they're so family first and afraid to call each other out, they let him sink further in, and they harmed somebody else in the process simply because he's not family. Also, it's wild to me because, like, Liz was introduced as a girlfriend and was treated so well. There is something to say about race and stuff like that, because Liz was treated so well as a girlfriend who was disliked upon entering the family. But Moses was the well-liked boyfriend, but because he had a tinge of melanin, he's not stuck up for by the family. He's not protected in any way. And his parents don't like him because they know that he's not protected when he goes over to their house. I'm gonna move on. I'm a little hot. But anyway, yeah, the message is about weak morals being the downfall of people. Weak morals and lack of action being the downfall of people. Like, what does it take to degrade your morals? Really and truly. I can understand survival degrading somebody's morals. I can't understand family harmony doing that, because, like, why would you want to be family and in community with people who are directly against your food for thought? Okay, so we're moving on to Wicked. When I say Wicked, I mean part 1. Part 2, I feel like pairs up with a different set of movies that I'll probably cover on a later date, but for right now I'm specifically talking about Wicked Part 1. Now, I did not need to rewatch Wicked Part 1 this week, because I watched Wicked Part 1 once a month. I watched that movie at least 12 odd times. Like, it's a sickness. That's my comfort movie. I've loved the movie since it came out, and I'm not really a musical fan, so I don't know what is in the water whenever I watch that movie. But I get up, I sing, I dance. It's a mess. I feel like every time I watch it, I'm just trying to grapple with all the different themes that one could glom onto when they're watching the movie, because, like, there's just so much. All of these movies have so much. I could have gone on a different path and paired these movies with a number of other movies and just put them together, because they're all so dense with character development, scene design. Like, the way the setting becomes a character in all of these movies is also something that I think is very important and adds like another layer of like understanding. So we're set in the land of Oz for this movie, obviously. So it's very fantastical. You're expecting, oh my gosh, these people are either like super advanced, super magical. They have all this access to all this knowledge, and they still behave like us. Like, they still behave primitive. Obviously, that's engineered by the wizard to a degree. Okay. Part of me was so interested in this movie because I did read the Wizard of Oz books. I know that, like, discrimination is like kind of a thing in Oz. Like, the Munchkins are kind of like, they're kind of over here, and then there are the Ozians. Now, Munchkins are Ozians, but not all Ozians are Munchkins, if you know what I mean. That's one of them. Same thing with the animals, the A and the uppercase A and the lowercase A, things like that. There's a whole lot of stuff. I'm trying not to talk about the books, but with the colored in context of the book, this movie just becomes like way better for me. Anyway, but like, yeah, even when you enter this movie, it immediately lets you know the caste system, so to say. Like, we see the Munchkins and the animals, uppercase A, in subservient roles. They're there to serve. And we know very clearly at a certain point in the movie that Elphaba and her family are not Munchkins. They just live in Munchkinland. But then we meet Green Baby Elphaba, and all those understandings of like who these people are and in relation to like Ozians and Munchkins and animals and whatever, all that gets thrown away because the baby is green, and that's a bad color to be. So she is hated and ostracized and looked down upon by everyone in her family and in Munchkinland. But the animals, I guess, are cool with her because of Dosey Bear? Oh gosh. Okay, yes. So the only reason they really take care of Elphaba is because the birth had an audience. Okay. I really feel like this would have been what did, you know that thing in Endgame where War Machine was like, what if we just, like, I really think it would have been that situation had the birth not had an audience. But let's continue. So yeah, she's hated by everybody, Munchkin, Ozzy, and alike. The animals are the only ones that don't really see her color, possibly because most animals don't see the same spectrum of color that humans do. Oh, whoa. Okay, never mind. We're gonna move on from that. But yeah, they treat her pretty much normally in every circumstance in the movie, from what I can see. Like, treat her like they would treat anybody else in Oz. So yeah, she's grown up, she's hated. The hate doesn't harden her quite as much as you would think it would. And I will say, here I'm gonna mention the perspective of like suppression and societal stuff. It's being narrated from two sides. So in the movie, in the play, we're technically being shown all of this from Glinda's perspective. Like, Glinda is the narrator. She's telling us like how she knew Elphaba and stuff like that, but she kind of takes a back seat after like the first number and stuff like that. So we understand that it's from her perspective, but we also understand that we're getting more of Elphaba's actual life than what Glinda knew about. And because we get to see majority Elphaba's perspective, we get to see the shadow side of Oz, people getting snatched away, animals getting snatched away in cages, going missing, having to have underground meetings, and doing all of that under the radar, because people who are looking for them are searching high and low to get them out of these positions and into cages. And the people who are complicit in letting it happen are not checking on them. So as their rights are being rolled away, the only one who's really taking notice of this is Elphaba. I think it's like, So Elphaba's hatred, or like the hatred that is put on Elphaba, doesn't really harden her as a character, but I do think that is because despite it all, she was lucky enough to be from a privileged background. I think if she was just born green in the countryside, they really would have tossed her out. That's just my mind being bad. Elphaba's oppression doesn't harden her in the way that it does the animals, because like, for all intents and purposes, it's not physical until she defies the wizard. At the beginning, or at least in Elphaba's perspective, she wants to be better for other people rather than being better for herself, because herself is not what people want. And they've made that very clear to her entire life. The only reason we're able to understand that as the audience is because we are allowed to be there with her in those moments and internalize what she's going through. But then also we're presented a very keen understanding of Oz and how it operates and who it likes and who it doesn't like. And it's kind of like we're playing two sides at once, where it's like, we understand what's happening before us is wrong as an audience member, but then like we understand why it's happening. And to be honest, watching the movie, sometimes I ask myself the question, how would I act in that situation? Like, in the situations, for example, where they brought the lion cub into the classroom in a cage, how would I act? If I wasn't green, how would I act? How would I act if I was green, you know? I think it gives you a lot of freedom to decide if you're on Elphaba's side or not, in a way that I think all three of these movies do, because in all three of these movies, there's an argument for being against the characters that you're viewing for the most part. Like, you can be against everybody in the movie and still enjoy the movie. And basically, how easy is it for you to choose what is right versus what is good for you? Like, how do you make that decision? Would you make that decision? When are you going to make that decision? All three movies are asking you, how do you choose between what's right and what's good? And how much distance would it take from any of their perspectives for your answer to change? How much distance from Elphaba's perspective would it take for you to choose what is good for you versus what's right for everybody? Anyway, yeah, those are just my thoughts for food for thought. I need to eat. I'm hungry. But yeah, those are three movies that I think go well together. I think it leaves me with a lot of questions and stuff like that to explore. And because they're so closely related to what's going on, to what's happening around us. But like, I feel like these are timeless pieces. They'll always be relevant, just to like lesser degrees, especially Anniversary, because it's a bit more polarizing than I Love Boosters or Wicked. But I think all three of them are timeless for those questions that they're asking the audience, whereas like, how much information do you need to support things other than yourself, and what is going to motivate you to support yourself, and how does it relate to what's going on with other people in the world? Yeah, I'm like beyond tired right now. I've had a headache for the past 3 days also, so I feel like that's why I've just been watching movies every day, because it's like I can just turn off the light. Like, when I have migraines, I turn off all the lights. As soon as I stop recording this video, I'm turning off all the lights. Like, my headache, it's massive right now, but I'm glad that I got to go through all three of these, because I do love these movies a lot. And I hope to do something again like this in the future. Like, I'm trying to find a lineup for Wicked Part 2, because to me, I feel like Wicked Part 1 and Wicked Part 2 don't necessarily go together with one another seamlessly, unless there's like other things in the middle. Like, I feel like I was saying before with like kids cartoons and stuff like that, I use one piece of media to understand others. So like, chopping them up, viewing them from different angles, how can I take this question and apply it to another movie versus another, and see how those stories change, evolve, and become enriching for me as a viewer. My head is killing me. Anyway, y'all, that's all from me today. I hope to come back actually writing something next week because it's been a hot minute, right? But anyway, yeah, if you like this video, please be sure to like this video. If you're interested in content similar to this, I do apologize because I don't have anything else like that on my page. But what I do have is scores and scores of me doing harebrained schemes to try and understand my own creative process. And if you're interested in that, I would recommend you take a scroll through, try out one of those videos. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. And stuff like that. And that's why... How long has this been sticking up? My hair messed up. I'm sorry, y'all. I messed up today.